Welcome friends to another r/AskReddit video. One question I need you to answer for me is, could you hit the like and subscribe buttons down below? But that said, our question of the day is by half of a brain cell. What is a supernatural event that happened in your life that just cannot be explained? Our first answer of the day is by Zealous Ideal Play 63. A family friend of ours, Gary, was terminally ill with cancer. He was a father figure to me and one of the few adult males from my previous life. I'm a recovering alcoholic that fully understood me. A friend and myself were in Moab, Utah and found a hostel to sleep in for the night. I had a dream about Gary. He looked amazing, completely healthy and backlit, and was wearing a multicolored sweater. He looked at me with concern in his eyes, pointed backwards and said, "I'm not doing too good." I woke up a bit shaken because it felt so real. I told my girlfriend about the dream and she asked me if I needed to call my mom to see how he was doing. I told her that it wasn't necessary because I knew they would call me if Gary passed. That day, we drove from Utah to Colorado and stayed in another hotel. About 5 a.m., I woke up and my phone was ringing. I could see that it was my mom and I already knew what she was going to tell me. She broke the news that Gary had passed, and I basically explained to her that Gary came and told me goodbye. I'm tearing up IRL right now writing this. The picture that his wife picked for his obituary was Gary in that multicolored sweater he was wearing when he came to me in my dream. Stories like this really make you want to believe that there's some kind of greater force, some kind of greater being that we just can't really understand right now. Whether it's a religious thing, whether it's just how the universe works. Do you personally believe that there's something more to life that we just can't understand right now? Let me know what you think in the comments down below. Our next answer is by Dune Manta. Working as night security for a small office at a sanitation plant. Building was a single entrance and you had to check in at the security station to get in or out. A worker shows up and checks in saying he needs to take care of a few things and grab some stuff. So I check in his ID and flip a few lights for him, then go back about my business. Fast forward a few hours and my shift is about to end. I still haven't seen the guy come back. So I go patrol the building to find him and I literally can't find him anywhere. He's not in any of the areas I turn the lights on for him, no other lights are on, and he's not in any other rooms. I stop by security to see if we just missed each other and he's trying to leave, but nobody's there. I do a second patrol and still no signs. At this point, I went to check the cameras to see where he went, but he's not on a single camera except the one covering the entrance and the security station. He turns down a hallway and never shows up on the next camera down said hall. At this point, I logged it as an incident and get the freak out right as the relief shift showed up. Next day, my boss calls me and says that the worker has been on vacation out of state for several days and wouldn't return for several more. Nobody could offer any explanation to what happened. Now, I have no idea what's going on in this situation. The bare minimum guess that I could do is maybe they had some kind of out of eyeshot secret spot, but that seems really unlikely. The scariest thing is I was thinking, oh, maybe there was a daydream or they dozed off a little bit, that could have explained it, but they were on cameras to some degree. They just disappeared halfway through it. Excuse me? Our next answer is by Cloth Diaper Addicts. The only way I can explain this one is wishful thinking. My mom and dad were codependent and they liked it that way. They didn't want other people other than the kids. They were completely happy to just be wrapped up in each other. My dad died the day before his birthday in a hospice center. Afterwards, it was like he was still home. His touch lamp beside his recliner would go on by itself. The recliner would rock like someone was getting in it, and sometimes my mom or sister would hear my dad saying, "Honey, fix me a cold drink?" That was exactly how he'd ask my mom to fill up his massive mug with Sprite over ice. My mother passed away less than a year and a half later. After my mother died, there was never another sign of either of them being there. They've been gone now for close to 14 years now. Whether you believe it or not, this is really a sweet story because the wishful thinking is that he was waiting for her, right? And now that they're together, they don't have to linger around anymore. It's really a sad but beautiful story. Our next answer is by Blick J. When I was a kid, about 10 to 12-ish, I was carrying a load of laundry upstairs home alone while my mom was out doing errands. We have this weird carpet runner over our hardwood stairs that's only really attached at the top of the flight, but otherwise not fitted or secured to each individual stair. So naturally I step on an air bubble of carpet with my vision obscured by the laundry and fall backwards while bear hugging a bunch of blankets. I specifically remember thinking, well, guess I'm about to die, while almost airborne with just my big toe left on the carpet, when I felt two hands, one on either side of my shoulder blades, give me a firm shove that launched me back up onto the step and diagonally against the stair rail. I assumed Mom somehow silently came back early without announcing herself and turned around to thank her while still clinging to the railing, but no one was there. I scurried upstairs to put my things down while calling her name and walking the house afterwards to check if any doors were unlocked or if her car were there. I finally resorted to calling her cell, where she told me that she was hitting up a few more stores. It still feels like there's a presence on that stairwell, like someone's watching, but in a protective way rather than sinisterly. Well, my friends, if you're going to be haunted, at least you're haunted by somebody that wants to save your life, not take it. If I gotta live with a spirit or a ghost or whatever, I suppose I could get along with somebody that's going to keep me up on my feet instead of falling to my death down the stairs. Make yourself pretty welcome to haunt my home after an event like that. Our next answer is by H.M. Fiddlesworth. Woke up once in the middle of the night to a man standing next to the bed staring at my significant other. He was slightly translucent and I figured it was just another sleep paralysis episode. Had them before, so knew the drill. And rolled over and went back to go to sleep. Normally, being able to move isn't a part of sleep paralysis. And immediately, my heart began to race as I realized I need to roll over and check what I saw. Person was still standing there, staring at my significant other, then he made eye contact with me, stared at me for a while before turning around and walking to the wall, slowly fading away with each step. Next morning, significant other wakes up looking like poop and said she had the worst sleep because she kept having the feeling that someone was watching her. Glad we no longer live in that house. Now, I will say that when I've slept, I've had some pretty convincing dreams that I thought might have been a sleep paralysis situation, but was actually just a very active imagination when I was really tired. Like, I've had plenty of dreams where my alarm goes off and I'll actually dream that I'm awake and trying to respond and like sitting up in my bed, trying to turn the alarm off and it just won't turn off. And then I wake up and it was so realistic, it was like convincing. So I'm not saying it didn't happen for OP, but there could be really convincing dreams. Our next answer is by Tennis Burst Gent. When I was 9 or 10, it was a bad year. I was regularly physically and emotionally abused, but that year, I was sexually abused. On top of all that, I started having serious mental health issues. Well, when things were at their absolute worst, I started having dreams of this blonde lady telling me to hold on, that things would get better. It was so comforting and peaceful and continued as long as the extreme abuse continued. I didn't know who she was, but I just figured I imagined her. Well, things finally simmered down and the dream stopped. About a year later, Mom was going through old photo albums and my blood freezes. I see the blonde woman from my dreams. I ask who she is. Turns out it was an aunt I had who died shortly before I was born. It's just great that at the darkest moments, there's things that sometimes happen like this that provide comfort and peace and continue to allow people to continue to have strength in difficult moments like that. Our next answer is by Green-Eyed Wench. I was about 15 and trying to sleep but having an asthma attack. Late in the night, I started hearing a rhythmic breathing from the floor next to the bed. It wasn't scary, more comforting, and it wasn't me because my breathing sounded way more messed up than that. It helped me calm down and get to sleep. Even though I was still sick, I was able to get my hands on an inhaler in the morning. At the time, I thought it was a friendly ghost. I later rationalized that maybe I was hearing a family member through the heating ducts. What I realized years later, when I had a dog, was that it sounded exactly like a big dog sleeping next to the bed. So now I'm 50-50 on whether a ghost dog came to visit me, or my own dog time traveled back about 10 years before she was born to comfort me. The way I know dogs, if dogs could time travel back in time to comfort you, they would do it, so I want to believe in that. Our next answer is by Smiling Gecko. Not scary, but still not explainable. When I was 22, I visited my grandma in her retirement home at Christmas. She was well, nothing out of the ordinary. A few days later, I traveled to my then boyfriend across the country. 2 days after New Year's, I woke up at 2 a.m. crying, and I just couldn't stop. I wasn't really sad or overly emotional, but the tears just kept streaming down my face. Nothing like that ever happened, and I was kind of confused, as was my BF. I fell back asleep a few hours later. 3 days later, I was informed that my grandma had died that night at about 2 a.m. Due to the divorce of my parents, communication was difficult and we were only informed after the funeral. I don't believe in anything supernatural, but it's hard to wrap my head around, especially since nothing like this ever happened again. Honestly, the amount of times where I've heard a story where, at some point, somebody started having really irrational behavior, whether it was angry, whether it was crying. I heard a story of a guy whose friend died. They had no idea, but they got in a fit of rage, were punching holes in the walls. It's weird to think that maybe there's some kind of greater connection we just have to people, like we just have some kind of sixth sense there. Our next story is by Kalimnak. I've had extremely vivid dreams of relatively inconsequential moments in my future life that I nonetheless keep locked away in a little corner of my head. And then when those moments actually occur, I get insane deja vu that throws me off until I remember the dreams. It's a very bizarre thing, but it ultimately doesn't mean much to me. I've had at least 2 or 3 events in my life happen exactly what Kalimnak's talking about here. There's these moments that are totally inconsequential, but when they happen and you find yourself in that exact moment your brain still remembers picture for picture, it's like some weird Raven Simone flashback jumping around deja vu moment. You're like, oh my god, did that just happen? Have I been here before? What's going on? Our next answer is by Solo Harvey Birdman. Many years ago, my parents had separated and my father was planning on taking a trip across the country to California. He was pretty excited about it. I talked to him the day before he's leaving, wish him well, and tell him I'll talk to him after he gets to California. The day of his trip, he calls me and tells me he decided last minute not to go. Refuses to really get into why, just says he changed his mind. Seemed really odd for something that he'd been planning for a couple of months. That night, I'm sitting at my girlfriend's house and we're watching the news, and they report that US Air Flight 1493, the flight my dad was supposed to be on, collided with another aircraft while landing in Los Angeles. About 25% of the people on the flight were killed. Hard to know how my dad would have made out because it really depended on where you were sitting, front versus back of plane. It was several months before he finally told me that that night he was supposed to leave, he had an extremely vivid dream that he died in a fiery plane crash. So vivid that it scared him out of flying that day. My dad is a Marine Corps Vietnam veteran who saw combat. I can only imagine how vivid the dream must have been to scare him out of getting on that plane in the morning. So is the story right at a Final Destination or something? To be fair, that would probably be just about the worst thing ever, having a very vivid dream, terrifying dream where you die in a plane crash, and then waking up, rolling over, and realizing, I'm supposed to board a plane really soon. If I ever have an event like that, now I'm going to second guess everything. And our final answer of the day is by Leondis04. When I was going to my family's home, I got in an SUV going down the road. This was in Bangladesh at the time, and after taking the SUV, the next 2 hours would be a highway going down a forest. I was sitting shotgun, and along the highway there was an old man walking down the highway. He was hitchhiking, and the driver decided to pick him up. He insisted on sitting in my seat, and I obliged as he was an older man. About an hour down the drive, our car collided with a bus, and the shotgun seat was mangled up. We all got out and we looked around, but we couldn't find the old man that insisted on taking my seat anywhere. Stories like these aren't rare, but I didn't believe them. We all know the man sat in my seat, and we all saw him, but he was nowhere to be found. The fact that they didn't find any clothing, they didn't find any blood, it was a mysterious old man in a forest. I don't know if that's the type of thing that you're supposed to keep secret and just move along and act like it didn't happen, but it might be kind of easy to do so. But with that being said, that's all the supernatural time we have for today. So of all these supernatural stories that I've read for you today, which was your favorite and why? Let me know in the comments down below. And if you haven't yet, if you could like and subscribe, that would mean a lot to me. Whatever you do, whether it's liking, subscribing, turning notifications on, all of it helps grow this channel and I appreciate the heck out of it. So until next time, I'll see you all tomorrow with some more stories.